So we're going to have this last session here. Try to keep, I feel like time's not on our side. So you're going to help me track time. We're going to see if we can get a really nice discussion here. This session is a little different from a normal discussion session, as you can see. We have some panelists, including someone who will pop up online soon. What I'll do now is just kind of frame out what's going to happen for the next hour. So you can see that the topic is going to be about open science and safeguarding the research enterprise. So I think probably talking to an audience that very much appreciates the importance of open science and transparency and driving, the research engine and really holding things accountable and maximizing that return on investment that we're all trying to do. And yet we know, and this whole conference has also been talking about not just one, but the many mechanisms that confront us in the sense of, well, how do we do that, right? How do we safeguard, that research enterprise? Yes, we can make things open, but what risks do we have, and how do we navigate those risks? Right? AI is just a current one. There's many that are out there. There's a couple other ones that are still going on. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna start by hearing some short statements from our three panelists. So we'll get there in a second. Ask the panelists to introduce yourself a little bit, and then you have about 5 minutes max. We're gonna really hold you accountable to that because we wanna make sure that we have time for discussion. So I'll do 1, 2, 3. You'll get to know our panelists. And then we're going to shift it over, and I've got some guiding questions to kind of have a grounded conversation and discussion. We'll go through each of those 4 questions, and I'll repeat this when we get there. And then we're going to open it up to have the online audience engage with us and our in-person audience engage with us. And we're going to basically do a little bit of a round robin. Hopefully this works. It's a little bit of a circus act. I feel like I'm going to have to do some orchestration here, but it's okay. And then our hour is going to be up. And I'll quickly summarize it before we close out this conference, or at least hand it off to Klaus to close out the conference. Okay, so with that, so I just gave some framing. So what we're going to do is we're going to have each of our panelists give a short impulse statement. And like I said, if you don't mind introducing yourself and where you're from before you do that, that'd be wonderful. And I'm going to do it from geographical location closest to where we are to farthest from where we are. So I think Julia gets to go first because she's from Kiel.
Oh, now you can hear me. Okay. Yeah, so my name is Julia Prieß-Buchheit. I already introduced myself to this room, I think, but I'm from Kiel University. And me and my team, we are working on teaching and learning open science and research integrity. I'm not going to use the slides, Tim, because you told me 10 minutes, and now you said 5 minutes. So, and I learned, but I'm going to show one picture, okay? It's this one. So I'm sitting here on the topic safeguarding the research enterprise. I think this is such a big question. I first wanted to say no, because who can say something to that? I don't know. So it's not me. Who I'm representing is a team, a European project, which is called IP4OS, Intellectual Property for Open Science. And we are working on, we are more or less working on capacity building to support open science with the help of fitting intellectual property rights. And I think that is an angle which is very interesting to the question of safeguarding the research enterprise. So what you can see on this very nice graphic, which was very expensive, this is a running joke, that you can see that IP can help us to support open science. And my statement is that open science actually is a global endeavor. It shows the objective, or what we want to have, or at least the trans-subjective goal of research to develop solutions for society, and not for one nation, but for the world. And the question is, how do we do that in a world which is regulated by national policies and regional policies and institutions which are regionally located? Is that okay? Was it 5 minutes?
Yes, that was excellent. Sorry for cutting you short, but you navigated it perfectly as I expected. All right, so geographically, we've got to go over to the UK. So I think we're going to go over to Jez.
Thanks. Yes, hi, my name is Jez Cope. I am currently data services lead at the British Library, which means I look after research data, collections as data stuff in the National Library. But I think the reason I'm sitting here on this stage is that I'm also part of a grassroots effort called Safeguarding Research and Culture, which is currently kind of driven by some of the events we're seeing taking place in the US around various public data sets starting to disappear, but actually has a much broader application. So 5 minutes. I have a tendency to waffle, so someone's probably going to have to shut me up. I think when I was thinking about this, like, humans like things to be simple. A lot of current discourse tends to collapse stuff down in complex situations down into very simple numbers, sound bite statements. And a lot of the media is now optimized around this. And this kind of tends to push into this narrative of being more efficient, doing more things faster. And actually, things are not simple. Statistics distill rich and varied populations down into just a handful of numbers. P-values reduce the building of a reasoned argument down to a simple binary yes or no. Is this right or is this not right? And models purporting to be universal, like LLMs, tend to have this same narrowing effect. I'm an outlier. I'm autistic. I tend not to be captured by bulk statistics, but my life matters too. So open science, open data gives us the possibility to examine the whole of the data that was recorded, which obviously is already a subset of reality. In all of its richness and weirdness, it lets us question received wisdom and popular narratives. And that is why some types of public data are uniquely under threat right now, because they do challenge those popular narratives, the existing power structures. Not all data needs to be open. Some data sets are so poor quality that their mere existence distorts reality around them. Some data sets pose a clear and present danger to individuals. Health information about sexuality or political beliefs or whatever. Some data sets are just too easy to cause harm with. Think crime statistics that are used to predict where crimes are going to occur, when actually what they predict is where people are poor. But open data allows us to slow down. It gives us the time to examine evidence that's been collected over a longer time period, to bring in other context, to consider it with new methods and things like that. It allows us to democratize research, but it doesn't guarantee that research is democratized, because there is still a lot of gatekeeping. And I have more. I can talk for days, but I'm going to stop because there are gestures happening over there.
That was perfect. I think you saw my hand gestures. That's all I was hunting for. All right. Now we got to go across the pond, and because it's very far, and I can tell you that, we're going to go virtually. So Peter, go ahead. It's your turn.
Thanks very much. And by the way, thanks for accommodating me coming in virtually. And I apologize to my fellow panelists for having a face twice as large as yours. I'm going to describe a brief problem and then a brief solution, and maybe we can get to further details in the discussion. In my country, research is under attack from the government. And I just want to list a few of the ways. I'm sure most of them are familiar to you. Research grants that have already been approved have been canceled or terminated or rescinded. The agencies that fund research have had their budgets slashed to reduce the amount of future research funding they can do. The scientific staffers at the science agencies within the government, many of them have been laid off. There have been significant reductions in the staffers there. Some smaller science agencies have been completely closed. certain kinds of data the government used to collect is no longer being collected, partly because there's no staff anymore to do that work, and partly because the data is inconsistent with the current administration priorities. Certain words have been banned. If they appear in grant applications, that application has a smaller chance of being funded. And I'm talking about words like greenhouse gas emissions and the word women. Federal science grant applications have to be approved by political appointees. Under new regulations, there's a role for peer review if the agencies want to use peer review, but the final decision must be made by a political appointee. This is all new. Some scientific findings by research agencies that grounded policies by the federal government have been reversed for ideological reasons. For example, the finding that greenhouse gases endanger human health, or the finding that a species can be endangered by encroaching on its environment. And finally, for many other reasons, including restrictions on travel of international students, the government has created fear among researchers. They feel they cannot talk about politics without risking their jobs or their future funding, and they cannot talk about certain scientific topics either, like climate, vaccines, or gender, without endangering their jobs or future funding. And this kind of fear shows up in self-censorship. So even when there isn't explicit government censorship, there is self-censorship. So my proposal in brief. Open access can reduce the harm of censorship, and it can reduce the risk of censorship, even if it cannot completely prevent censorship. In particular, repository-based open access or green open access can do this. Every open access work is published under an open license. Every work under an open license can be copied freely without payment or permission. And if we can get more research works into repositories with open licenses, then they are not only available through that repository, but they are subject to being copied into other repositories in other countries, so that if one country starts to censor the contents of the works under its control, those works are available from other repositories in other countries without censorship. This only works if we actually do it. And so I propose that we actually do it. And I wouldn't want to leave the impression that American universities are unable to do it because our government is now censoring science. The American universities are still in a position to do this, and of course they want to do it. They want to get out from under this censorship. They want to free themselves from censorship. So this is not just a job for the countries that are relatively free of censorship today. It's a job for all countries, North and South, East and West. So I propose an international community-led collective action program in which we cooperate and, first of all, get more and more works, preferably all new research works, into open access repositories under open licenses, and then systematically copy them to other repositories in multiple countries. Thanks, I'll stop there.
Wonderful, thank you. Thank you, Julia, Jez, and Peter. We can go to those guiding questions. And so I'm gonna explain what we're gonna do here and see how well we do. I'm sure we're gonna do great. I've already watched this audience engage virtually and online to everything being asked of you guys. You're creative. So we're gonna go through, you can peruse these. We're gonna go through these guiding questions. We're gonna do one by one. The goal there is just to give us something to anchor on. When we do that, I'll lead that and I'll stop it. So I'll be checking the time, Jez, don't worry, I got this. Try to keep your questions or comments. You can give comments, right? They're questions. I'm sure you guys right now are steaming with statements you want to say as well as questions. Try to keep it brief, just because our time's going to go really fast. What I'll do is I'll go back and forth between panelists and the audience and what's online. We're going to be using Slido, as you know. Every single time I have to stop us, it's just going to stop one of the questions and we'll reset everything. So folks online, don't worry, everything's going to be archived, but it's all going to get reset again. And it's just going to allow us to have this conversation following these questions, essentially 4 times, 4 little rounds to have an open conversation. So let's get started, because the more I talk, the less you guys get to talk. So let's switch to the first one here. Oh, you got this, come on. No. Can you go to the next slide on the guiding questions? Oh, there it is. Okay, so we'll start here. So you guys can start formulating it. Oh, do I hand, if the audience has something, I can hand them my microphone. That works for me. Or if you want to grab another one. All right, get your questions or comments, like I said, both using this to respond to what you just heard from our 3 panelists, as well as just what your own thoughts are. And again, like, we'll try to keep it brief. So while we get that started, and we can go and get Slido up there, so this is going to vanish for a moment. We'll get Slido going up, and we'll get Peter back, because we want to see Peter up on the screen. Why don't I actually just start this, and again, raise your hand if you have something in person. But why don't we get this started a little bit with our panelists? And since I cut Julia off earlier, we'll let her just maybe make a little bit of a statement here on, like, what are your thoughts? Trying to think about how open science can make things more resilient to that external influence. But again, in the meantime, raise your hand and start queuing up for statements or questions.
I think we heard a lot about this already from Peter. However, but like for me, there are always 2 sides. So the first one is that research in itself, is like is built on sharing knowledge, and this is the first thing. And I think open science emphasizes this with transparency and sharing, and using the tools we have at hand now, like with digitalization. So this is the first thing we have to keep in mind. Like, open science is the way to share knowledge across, not in one nation, not in one institution also, but also globally. So the question is now, how does it make it more resilient? That's another question. And I think actually some techniques or strategies like mirroring comes in here, as Peter said, and I do like that. Like from my field, we also have to think about fitting intellectual property rights. So Peter, you mentioned open science licensing. These are quite common. I think they work well. However, they don't work in every context, as we know. So not in every country, open licensed material, or people are not allowed to use open licensed material. That we have to acknowledge that. So as I learned from actually our partners in the IP4S project, we also have to support the right policy making, so that we do have the right legal strategies at hand, to make actually what we are doing legally secure, so that we can refer to it and that we can say, okay, but this belongs to here, nobody can take it away, or at least we have a right that nobody takes it away. So I think there are 2 layers. It's on the one layer is, of course, we have to push open science into the research ecosystem on a general level. However, we also have to work on policy making, so that we have the fitting rights, and in that sense, licenses, also intellectual property rights like patents, this is a big question always, and other rights, so that we can then start really sharing the knowledge in a way that we have the right to do it, and nobody takes it away in 1 second.
That's great. Again, if you want to make a statement or ask like a question to the panelists or to the rest of it, just raise your hand and I'll bring the mic, or someone will bring the mic over to you if there's anyone here that wants to do that. I'm kind of curious, we'll let that online kind of go a little bit farther. I'm going to ask a little question myself. I'm kind of curious because, there's this question I have, and I think you were just getting at it, Julia. So Jez, maybe you want to chime in until we get someone else to ask a question or a statement. There's a lot of, we've got one. Let me ask quick on primate. We'll give it to you in a second if that works. But there's a lot of definitions of external influence. And I think that to me I find very interesting, which is we want some external influence. That's peer review, that's publishing, that's getting public engagement. So I'm just curious to know, like, how that works in the open science space, right? We want engagement, but maybe we have to be very mindful of like what counts as the influence and who gets to decide that.
good question. Yeah, so external influence. Thinking about it from a physics perspective, I guess there's an aspect of if a thing is really big and heavy, like if we've got a lot of data about a lot of evidence about a certain thing, it's a much more difficult, whatever your definition of external influence, to sort of change the perception or the reporting about that. But I think you said it. You said we have to be. What word did you say? It wasn't reflective, but like we have to be reflective. We have to have broad conversations. We have to not keep those discussions within very narrow bounds, whether they're narrow political bounds, whether they're narrow disciplinary bounds. I think having those broad conversations, giving people who might be affected by research the tools to understand what effect it has without necessarily them needing to be experts. Because I think I'm getting very rapidly away from the specific question that you asked.
Oh, that's great. Let's turn it to the audience internally. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi. This will be like a comment and a kind of a question, majorly at Peter because he brought up the topic. And yeah, we see this big example nowadays, right? In US, there's this weird stuff is happening, and I agree to him. Everything that he said on the systemic level with openness, we can try to beat the censorship and everything. But what about the individual level? And let's say there is an early career researcher who is trying their best to push out openness, push out open science, but at the end they have to do maybe self-censorship, maybe they have to go through fund cuts, and suddenly they're out of open science, or maybe totally out of science. I don't know if we can address this as a community or like researchers in total. So I don't know what to do, and I just want to ask to the other senior people that's around here, what can be done, or can anything be done?
Yeah, this isn't. I'm completely with you. So what we are doing is we do training in 27 countries. Yeah. So and while we are doing these trainings, actually, this is the question we get. Yeah. So like, I'm the single researcher. What shall I do now? And they're like in very different ways. So the questions go from, can I still put my data on OSF? Yeah. Or shall I? Is it better to leave it here in Europe? And all these different things. So that's why I raised this policy making. I don't think that, yes, every researcher can or should make their own decisions right now. Yeah. Acknowledge what is going on. Yeah. And maybe also use the techniques of mirroring. Also, a single researcher can mirror. Yeah. You can put it there. Maybe you have secondary publication rights. Yeah. Oh, I sometimes feel like a lawyer, but yeah. But if you're coming from one of these 7 countries, then please start mirroring. That means you are allowed to mirror your own articles as often as you want. On the other hand, I think we should push every organization and every policymaker in Europe, yeah, to give us the rights, yeah, to establish the the boundaries, yeah, and the strategies we need, because they're not in place right now. They're not in place.
That's great. That's great. Thank you for that question. Peter, I don't know if you want to say something very briefly now. Otherwise, I want to turn to, if you want to say something quick, then we'll go to Slido for a second.
Yes. First of all, I agree with Julia that one obstacle to my proposal is the fact that copyright differs slightly from country to country. It does not differ in the basics, but it differs slightly, and the effect of open licenses can differ from one legal jurisdiction to another. So one aspect of my proposal that I didn't have time to mention before is that it can succeed by degrees. And we can start by doing as much as we can, and then we can keep trying to do more and more. And we shouldn't expect that it fails if we can't do everything right away. But I want to go back to the earlier point. Sorry, I can't tell from here who made the point. But influence is good, or at least not all influence is bad. And we should welcome some kinds of influence. We want to learn from our peers. We want to learn sometimes from the people who referee our articles. We want to stand on the shoulders of giants. We want to build on prior work in our own field. So we should think more carefully about what kinds of influence we want to resist. And of course, there's outright censorship from funders who ban certain words or who don't fund climate research or gender research. But we're getting to the more difficult parts of trying to please the people who employ us. Is that censorship? We all have to, at least we academics, have to get hired in the first place. Then we have to please our promotion and tenure committees. They might expect us to publish in certain journals. They might not want us to publish certain unorthodox theories in our fields. We might know that those theories or those positions will be punished at promotion and tenure time. It doesn't matter whether you call that censorship, but it's a kind of influence that is regrettable, that limits the freedom of authors to publish what they want. I don't see an easy way around that. If you want to get your work out in the form in which you personally approve it, we do have preprints, and preprints are part of the open science ecosystem, but the wrong preprint can get you fired or can prevent you from being promoted and tenured. So in the short term, there's a solution from open science, but in the long term, there isn't. We still have to work with other people, and our career can depend on their judgments.
That's great. Great. Thank you, Peter. Can you put the Slido back up for just a moment? So I'm going to read the first question, the first statement. I think this is a good one, and I think we're going to come back to this, right? This globally open shared science is harder to censor. I think that's a really important point. But let's read that. Let's see if there's thoughts from the panelists on that second question. Is there a danger that open science might be attacked by injections of fabricated data, analogous to what is happening with information news? I don't know if Julia or Jez or Peter, you have thoughts and want to comment on that.
Yes.
I guess I'll just start. Yes, it can be. Just as you're free to publish your own views, cranks are free to publish their views, and some of them are simply wrong, but some of them are malicious, some of them are mischievous, some of them are trying to pollute the discourse. We have nothing but peer review and discussion to cure that problem. If we try to prevent that problem, then we become censors ourselves. So we already deal with a world in which lots of scientific proposals are wrong or mistaken or incomplete, maybe even put forth in bad faith, but we deal with them through peer review and discussion. We just have to continue to rely on that. We should bear in mind that the barrier is lower for preprints, but most preprints turn out to be publishable even after peer review. That is, we don't have a serious problem of people publishing mischievous preprints today. There turns out to be a larger problem publishing mischievous peer-reviewed postprints in these paper mills that claim to perform peer review. But I think our system is working pretty well, and we can't immunize it from mischievous proposals. We shouldn't expect to be able to.
I mean, one of the things that you do see is that research built on fabricated data, that fabricated data often isn't made open, because if it is, there are statistical patterns that you can detect in made-up data. There are also then comparisons and triangulation you can make with other data sets that have also been collected. And if this one data set that supports this one crank theory doesn't seem to have any consistency with any of the rest of the world, that feeds into then our debate and our discussion and our evaluation of the merits of various points of view upon which we base our actions in the world, I guess.
That's great. You know what? Don't get rid of the questions here. Let's leave this going up. We'll just keep it moving. But I'm gonna, if you don't mind, switching to the guiding questions just for a moment. I just want the discussion going. I'm just gonna insert another question in here just to see if we can keep it going, which is, and maybe we'll get back to that bigger question, and let's get rid of how does to how can open data and access. What's the process? that open data and open access can contribute to the credibility of research in the context of safeguarding. So again, let's leave the Slido as is, if that's okay. Yep. And again, audience, if I'm not always paying attention, like just keep your hand up if you want to say a comment or a tangential question, just to kind of keep this discussion going. But I'd be curious now, I think on here, and I'm doing this on purpose now, because if we go back to Slido, we'll see that someone did ask, I think, a good statement, which is, okay, good. So maybe there is a way to do it. Peter, maybe you want to start, since it was in response to you, which is, how can we achieve this? So I'm going down to the third one there that's 6 as well. Right, so how can we do that? And one thing I think that would be important to remember is we're global, right? And open data and open access is not funded per se globally. It's funded nationally and regionally. So Peter, if you want to start, I'd be just as curious then to pull it back to these 2 panelists on stage to get their thoughts.
Yes, if I understand you, you're asking me, how do we carry out my proposal?
That's right.
It's true that science is locally funded and locally performed, maybe even locally published, but the internet is international, it's global. And I should add, one of the limitations on open access is that it only gives access to people with an internet connection, and we still have a digital divide, and huge numbers of people still don't have internet connections. But again, we do what we can when we can, and we try to do better all the time. So if we can make work open access, then it's available to everybody who does have an internet connection. That's international. But I'm very aware of the obstacles to my proposal. One of them is the legal differences among countries. But another is simply getting more and more work, and that includes text and data and code into repositories so that we can start this systematic duplication to minimize the harm of censorship.
Right.
And one way to do that is to increase the number of green open access policies at funding agencies and universities. If more work is put into repositories in the first place, by virtue of these policies, then more work is in a position to be copied and duplicated for safekeeping around the world. There's also a role for rights retention open access policies, and the reason we need those is that publishers can try to prevent what we're talking about through their publishing contracts. But if the author has retained rights through a rights retention policy, then the author does not need the publisher's permission to share their work through a repository. That's a key step. And there are both funders and universities with rights retention policies. Those have to spread before we can get much further with this proposal.
Great, thank you, Peter. Don't mind putting the slide back up, thanks. Julia, I wasn't sure if you wanted to say something or not. Nope, okay, great. Again, raise your hand in here. So I think one of the questions that I think is relevant here that came up is and was already touched upon, right, is, well, what can we do in terms of really helping that? So what is the key, that first question there, what is the key argument you would present to policymakers to ensure continued policy funding support for open science, even when it seems counterintuitive to them? So wondering if Jez or Julia, you're interested in commenting on it. And while you're thinking about that, I'm going to add something that came out of the last session I was in that's very related to this, which is, it's not just policymakers. How do we also talk to other researchers who are skeptical of open science because of the fact that they are worried it might get used for multiple reasons, right? That it might not be used for the reasons that they intended. So if we want more content, more data, more papers, more preprints in the open, it's not just the policymakers, it's the researchers, the grassroots. How do we talk to our colleagues that are not in this room because they're skeptical? So I think we can combine those together. Go ahead, Julia.
Yeah. So this is a key question. So from my perspective, reliability of research results or even research outputs is more or less what we all thrive for. I never heard a person saying to me no. So everybody more or less goes with it. Okay, what we are doing, we want to, when we produce something, it should be reliable. At the end, maybe we have a few steps in between. So if you go with this argument and you say, okay, we want reliability, and if research is then used, it can be used in a good way. We need to created in a way that it is transparent, so it can be in a way tested from somebody else, maybe even criticized by somebody else, so that we can improve it. So that we can find errors we made. We can find them by ourselves, but maybe somebody else can find them. Yeah, this is how the research system works. Yeah, this is how it always worked. But in former times, yeah, we had to travel 500 kilometers, yeah, to meet our colleague and to sit down and show everything. Yeah, or we had to write letters. Yeah. Now it's very easy. We can share our knowledge very fast, yeah, and even to people we do not know, yeah. So actually, this peer review system, which we know from the publishing industry, yeah, it's there, but it also works between colleagues, yeah, without the word peer review. It's like I give it out, and somebody out of the room is also interested in my topic, and they pick it up, yeah, and go through it and make it sometimes better, yeah, or have questions. And then sometimes I come back and say, oh, okay, let's have a look. So for all of that, we need transparent research. So I think that's the answer for open science. Yeah, this is something inside. Oh, thank you. Inside research. Yeah.
Oh, that's excellent. Wait, Jez, before I think you wanted to say something. Can you go to the guiding questions for a moment? Julia, you just teed it up really well. We're going to keep the conversations going. I think we've been talking largely, right, it's at a high level, but if we think about it, we're thinking sometimes just of those artifacts we produce, the data, right, the preprints, the journal published articles. But I think you just hit on another key piece that just, I'll let you answer the other one, but we'll tie into it, which is it's not just those artifacts, it's how you found those artifacts, the process of it. And that is a big question, right? It's just, are we missing something by not exposing our processes to protect against influence and interference, and also helping with credibility? So anyways, just wanted to comment. It's not going up yet, but that's okay. But Jez, go ahead if you want to add something else.
Yeah, just sort of, it's gone now. So just thinking about that, kind of how do you respond to the resistance? I think one of the things we see a lot is that the benefits are often framed in general, in the abstract, and the pitfalls, the risks are often framed in being very specific. And I think reframing how we do that discussion when we're talking to people, policymakers tend to be able to respond to this is good for society, this is good for our country's standing in the world, whatever. Individuals tend to be as much motivated by is there a present danger to me to doing this? Is this going to affect my career? So I think phrasing the benefits in those terms has a lot of merit to it.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. A bit of a question back to the audience here in particular too. I'd be just as curious if someone wanted to chime in and say, what do you say to policymakers or your researchers or whoever at your institution that you're from around, I think, what is the $1 million question, right? Which is, right, we want to make our data, we want to make our processes, we want to make our artifacts open. We all see that, yet there is now many, many fears, more than the traditional incentive fear. So if someone has thoughts on like, well, this is what I say, or this is my concern, I'd be just as curious to hear from the audience what you're thinking about this question as well. So maybe we'll move to, I actually don't know this question, so maybe someone can actually enlighten me, which is the second one there that's online. TIB built a dark archive of Archive, the preprint. How is this working? Who's paying for it? Peter, Julia, Tex, does anyone here know? Actually, I actually don't know who TIB is.
That's Technische Informationsbibliothek.
What's that?
Technical
Library
of Information Science. Basically, it's Technische Informationsbibliothek Hannover, and in English it's something like Natural Science Library in Germany. And they have the license to archive essentially publications in the technical fields in Germany. and they take this license very serious, and so they also do archives and video and things like this. Like videos of lectures like this, for instance, they have an archive of these kind of things.
The British Library is in a similar position in the UK in terms of legal deposit. Unfortunately, we don't have the resources to justify archiving things like Archive, which are already available to UK citizens. But it would be great to be able to do that.
Oh, that's really. And Peter, I don't know if you have something else to say. I mean, I'm the most familiar with Internet Archive, which doesn't do it as a dark archive, but that's an interesting one in terms of just preserving all content public on the internet. We actually use it ourselves at the Center for Open Science to preserve our own content. Anything posted on OSF publicly, Internet Archive purposely grabs it for us with metadata to preserve it. But go ahead, Peter.
Yes. Internet Archive is wonderful. The TIB Dark Archive of the Cornell Archive is also wonderful. These are the kinds of things we need more of. The Internet Archive is an open or a bright archive, not a dark one. The Cornell Archive used to have mirrors around the world, and for some reason it had to lay them down. But at the same time it laid them down, this independent or unaffiliated archive sprang up, and that's a wonderful thing. That's the kind of thing that has to be multiplied across many jurisdictions. The one limitation on the Internet Archive is that it's based in just one country. It has mirrors, but we need more mirrors everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that. Okay, well, thank you for telling me what TIB was. I feel like I just learned something amazing here myself. Maybe we can flip to those guiding questions. We'll pivot one more time to this last thought. Keep this going. And Julia, this one's for you because again, I stole your time in the beginning. But thinking again, like about the strategies, and again, we heard one, right? We need more duplication, mirroring to be done and to be done in multiple countries. Obviously, that's great to hear these efforts. But there's other tools, other strategies that are out there, using IP, as you mentioned. So you can slide off that and go back to Slido, and we'll let Julia maybe take a comment here since I cut you short earlier when you were doing your principles.
Shall I answer that question now? Yeah. So I'm going to read the question again to you. I think this is a really weird question, and I already told you. Yeah. So what strategies such as security and intellectual property can be used to balance open science principles with the need to protect sensitive information? So this is what comes along often in my work. So people use intellectual property on the one hand, like here, far, far away on the left, and open science far, far on the right. Yeah? And they say, okay, these are two different things, and they're actually opposite of each other. I think that happens because people think when they hear intellectual property, they think about intellectual property rights patenting or trade secrets, like closing down. Yeah, like you're not going to be able to use my research. Yeah, but actually that's not the fact. So if you look closely, you can see that there are intellectual property rights which help open science, which support open science, such as open licensing. That is the intellectual property right. And there are others. So this question is very difficult to answer for me too. But okay, what strategies do we have? Of course, there are already some in place, and we already mentioned them. Yeah, and they go. So you might know some, and some you don't know, but you use them. Yeah, you do not have to be lawyers and understand the concept. It's more like you have to know how to do it. So often we use badges, to just indicate, are you allowed to? Is somebody else allowed to reuse it for how long? And in what time frame and in what region? So even the patenting people say they're helping making content open. Why? Because if you patent, your research result, you have to make it open. You have to describe it. It goes into the patenting repository. They call it differently, but that's for me. There's a patent repository, and you have to put it there. Everybody is allowed to see it, but nobody's allowed to use it for 25 years or for 10 years or for 5 years. And if you do that with the international patent repository, the whole world can see it. So it is making it open. it's just like putting the finger on you. You're not allowed to use it, but only for 25 years. And after 25 years, you can do nothing, and it is in the world. So I would even say that patenting is a intellectual property right, which helps us to spread knowledge. Not all knowledge is for dissemination in the first or freely. Some have different techniques, but I think that there is a lot of knowledge which is not, which we don't make accessible at all. So we should look at that. It's not on these specifics what is already going on. But on what is in the dark. What is laying around, and how can we help there? I didn't go on sensitive information. I don't think we need to.
I don't think so. We can flip. Go ahead. Did you want to say something, Jez, or no?
Yep. Not about that. I was just going to, since Lambert teed me up so nicely. Thanks, Lambert. I owe you a beer. So building as well on Peter's proposal from the opening, the safeguarding that Lambert mentions here is safeguarding research and culture, the project I mentioned earlier, and very much complementing, not intending to replace or compete with the kind of broader, higher level, well-resourced institutional approaches. But the approach we're taking within that project is to enable people, individual people around the world, if they've got the skills to identify, to download data sets, to do that, to make sure that there are copies of them, to turn those into, we're using BitTorrent, the 90s are back, to distribute copies of those around the world using BitTorrent. You don't need any kind of technical skills to do that. You just need a BitTorrent client. You can contribute storage to that archive. And it's that kind, I think that combination of grassroots individual people doing what they can and the institutional approaches is really important. One of the advantages that we see in this is that individuals can go, that thing's going to go down at the end of the week. There's been an announcement. Let's make sure there's a copy of that safe. That then, I talked earlier about slowing down. That keeps the window of opportunity open longer for the discipline for who that data is relevant, or an institutional archive to take a more measured approach to curating and preserving it for the long term. And then those curated data sets can go back into the kind of mad, globally distributed archive for even more resilience. So it all feeds together.
Excellent. Thank you, Jez. I'm going to turn over to Slido here. I'm going to read that top comment. It's an interesting one. It's a statement. Think twice before building research pipelines with tech companies that are in bed with the US government. You could also remove the last part. I think it's still a good statement. Something to keep in mind. So here's another question, and maybe Peter, I'll let you take a stab at it first. What can we do if OS policies are framed as a problem with regard to knowledge security? For example, we can't publish data because authoritarian regimes will use them.
I see this objection more often with texts than with data. So I have an answer for text, and I'm aware that it might not apply well to data. There are some nationalists in the United States who oppose U.S. open access policies because it would share knowledge with our economic competitors and our military competitors, our adversaries. The problem with that argument is that if it's not open access, it's going to be published in a paywall journal. And it's not as if our adversaries can't afford to buy subscriptions to those journals. They do, they have. Osama bin Laden spent about $4 million or more on his project. And the Russian government, the Chinese government can buy and do buy subscriptions to our paywall journals. So not making it open doesn't shield it from them. And the argument creates a nationalist argument for science, which is we have to beat other countries in science. when in fact science is international, and there's almost no scientific result, any solid, legitimate result, which hasn't been supported and strengthened by international collaboration. We have to share it simply to make the science stronger. Now, if sharing data with other countries becomes a military, let's say a national security risk, I'm not sure how to reply to that. There was a time in the 1980s under the George W. Bush administration when scholarship was covered by trade embargoes. U.S. companies were not allowed to sell products to Iran or Cuba, for example. And those were interpreted to apply to scholarly journals. And this became one of the few points on which open access advocates like me and conventional academic publishers agreed. That is, this is wrong. Trade embargoes should not apply to scholarship. And I admit, as I say, that this argument about texts may not apply to data if the data could be used maliciously. But let's remember that the genome sequence of the Ebola virus was publicly shared by the US government, even after deep consideration of the risks of doing so. That is, the benefits of sharing it, namely developing preventive techniques and cures, outweighed the risks of its misuse. You might say that's a close call, but we've already made the hard call in cases like that, and I think we could do the same in similar cases in the future.
Thanks, Peter, for sharing that. I don't know if Julia or Jez, you have something to do. If not, I think I'd be very curious on this very next question I see on there, because I think it's a really nice way to think about this. It's a good reflection, right, of what are we doing. So open science, as done now, makes research less resilient, not more. Everyone shares a single instance. That's the point. Replication is an expensive feature we must build. I think that's a really, really good comment to think about. And Jez, I see you teed up and you want to add a little bit to it. So go ahead.
I mean, the one that comes to my mind immediately is Git and GitHub and open source software. A lot of like Git was designed to manage the development and sharing of software in an extremely radically decentralized way. And almost immediately it became widely used. We went back to putting it all in one place, GitHub. But it's the architecture doesn't necessitate that in any way. One of the things that caused that to happen is the classic technique of bolting on loads of extra features, issue tracking, pull requests, code reviews, continuous integration. These are all useful things to have, but they don't prevent us from pushing a Git archive or a data set or whatever to multiple places. There's a danger with the kind of focus on efficiency that we just need one copy, or we just need as few copies as gives us our particular number of nines guarantee of resilience. And I kind of feel that focus on efficiency is fundamentally opposed to the resilience and the replication that we're talking about here. There needs to be a balance. Obviously, we can't just... Things cost money. We can't do everything. But focusing purely on minimizing the cost, purely on efficiency in a very narrow sense isn't helping us.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. AI, we constantly talk about the other aspect of environmental and cost impacts. It's the same thing. This is obviously a criticism of people who are like, I'm not going to share my data because you guys are just spending money, having the data up. No one's using the data. Why are we doing this? So I think that's a broad question. We're getting close to the end of the time. I'm still looking here in person if there's somebody who wants to say it. But I really like this last question. Maybe Julia wants to weigh in a little bit, which is a different framing around this, right? Which is even more important would be the question of how open science contributes to the reputation of researchers in the context of reputation competition. And I think that is, in some cases, also what we're talking about here, right? We're not just talking about safeguarding it for the sake of just preservation. We're talking about the impact this has on researchers themselves. I don't know, Julia, if you want to take a stab at that. If not, maybe we'll either skip it or we'll let Peter or Jez go.
I think that's a very difficult question. Okay, yeah. So yeah, the research assessment is the big word here. I think so. Do we get awarded for doing open science practices? I think there are many movements on the way to support that. However, we are not there yet. Yeah, so I think everybody here in the room can realize that they're like little sparks here and there, but not in a general way. I'm just going to pivot now very far away from that because I want to raise that. We talked about a lot, but we didn't talk about data sovereignty. Yeah, so I just want to raise that because we always turned it around. So yes, reputation. I think that's an important part for the open science, like to engage researchers, yeah, which are the end users or the end people we're always talking about. So this is an important topic. Yeah, we just have to push it. Yeah, how far we can. On the other hand, like data sovereignty is something I understand you just gave the technical answer to, and I'm not a tech person, not at all. So I'm always like try to listen and understand. But what I understand also from Guido, he taught me that also in Kiel, is you have the solutions, they're there, just nobody wants to pay for it. Yeah. Okay, so I do understand that. Yeah. And then the question is, when we do have that, yeah, the question is, do we have to do it together? Is it a collaboration effort? I think that's the part. Yeah. So, and are we going to do it cross borders? Yeah, or where? And I just want to raise the European Open Science Cloud. So this is a European effort. Is a cross border thing? Yeah. I do not know if they use this technique or not because that's what I don't understand. But I think it is like a first step towards data sovereignty. It is Europe. It could be broader. Yeah, I think the global effort would be also good, but it is a first step, and maybe we can have a look there how they're doing it.
I guess, like, I would go back to my previous statement that we need the big institutional organized effort, and we need the small individual chaotic efforts, and like focusing on only one of those things misses part of the picture. So I think my answer to your question is yes, we need it all. Let's be as chaotic as possible. Not because I love chaos, although maybe I do a little bit, but because it's, again, kind of comes back to diversity and duplication. And part of that duplication isn't just repeating the same things, but is doing things in multiplicity of different ways. And those different ways of doing things tend to have different risk profiles. They have different different sort of angles of attack for someone who wants to shut them down. And having that diversity of approaches gets you more resilience at that slightly higher level. So yes, we need the collaborative approaches, we need the cross-border approaches, we need networks of individuals doing weird things with 1990s file sharing protocols. We need it all.
We're at time, and I really like the way you ended that, because I'm trying to sit here thinking, wow, like what's the summary of this? It's a long conversation, a really good one that's important, and I think what you just said, Jez, sums it up for me a bit, right? We have methods. They exist. I mean, we're looking at a room that both has developed, advocated, and continues to generate them. That is a bit of the problem, but it's not actually our problem. Our problem is implementation. Our problem is about how to do that in the complex system that we're in, right? It is decentralized, it is global, and it's always under attack, actually. It's just we can talk about what's going on now, be that political or current AI, but tomorrow it's going to be another one, something that we're not prepared for, and we want to be resilient to that. And to me, what you just said is the win. Diversity is our friend. We are global, we have many approaches, so the more that we lean into that that actually will probably help us a lot. How to do that? That's a bit of a social exercise, probably more than a technical one. So I want to stop there. Thank you, Peter, for joining us online. Thank you, Jez. Thank you, Julia. And thank you, audience, in person and online. So thank you, everyone.